Vienna, April 9th, 1945. Captain Dmitry Loza peers through his commander's cupola as his M4A2 Sherman rumbles through the shattered streets of the Austrian capital. Behind him, 17 more American-built tanks follow in column, their white-painted stars barely visible beneath layers of mud and soot. Somewhere ahead, German Panthers wait in ambush. Loza's orders are impossible. Lead 18 tanks 100 kilometers through enemy territory, reach the city centre, capture the bank. His crew has not slept in 36 hours. The driver's hands shake from exhaustion as he works the controls, but the tank beneath them purrs like a sewing machine. Loza pats the turret ring. He has fought in Soviet tanks. He knows the difference. This American machine might just keep them alive long enough to see the war's end. This is the story of a tank the Soviet Union never asked for and could not stop requesting. A vehicle that officials' Soviet doctrine dismissed as inferior to the homegrown T-34. A foreign machine that elite Guards units actively demanded, turning in their legendary Soviet tanks to be completely re-equipped with American Shermans for the final offensive into Germany. The men who crewed these tanks called themselves Emchisti, Sherman men, and they guarded their American machines with a devotion that baffled political officers and contradicted 50 years of Soviet propaganda. The paradox cuts to the heart of what actually mattered to men fighting and dying inside steel boxes. Sometimes the best tank is not the one with the thickest armour or the biggest gun. Sometimes it is simply the one that keeps you alive. Understanding why Soviet tankers preferred American machines requires examining what the Red Army actually received and how they received it. The United States shipped 4,102 M4A2 medium tanks to the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease program. This represented 18.6% of all Shermans sent to Allied nations. Of these, 2,007 carried the original 75mm gun, while 2,095 mounted the superior 76mm weapon. Soviet records document 3,664 officially received, with the remainder lost to U-boats in the freezing waters of the Arctic convoy routes. The first Shermans arrived via convoy PQ-18 on September 21, 1942. 36 tanks rolled off the docks and deployed immediately to the Northern Caucasus front. The trickle became a flood. In 1943, 469 arrived. In 1944, that number exploded to 2,345. By the time Captain Loza led his column into Vienna, American factories had delivered more Shermans to the Soviet Union than Britain received for the entire North African campaign. The Soviets specifically requested the diesel-powered M4A2 variant after testing the gasoline-powered M3 Lee proved unsatisfactory. When American representatives informed them that a diesel Sherman existed, Soviet officers were eager to obtain them as soon as possible. They rejected the gasoline M4A4 outright as mechanically complicated. The diesel engine matched Soviet fuel logistics, simplified maintenance, and reduced fire risk, concerns that would prove prophetic in the burning hulls scattered across the Eastern Front. By early 1945, 3 entire Guards Mechanized Corps operated exclusively on American tanks. The 1st Guards Mechanized Corps fielded 184 Shermans. The 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps deployed 176, including 108 with the long 76mm gun. The 9th Guards Mechanized Corps, where Captain Loza commanded a battalion, maintained between 126 and 185 Shermans depending on replacements and or losses. These were not second-line units receiving hand-me-down equipment. These were the Red Army's elite, and they had specifically requested American tanks. The reasons for this preference had nothing to do with patriotism and everything to do with survival. Soviet tankers who served in both vehicles understood differences that factory specifications could never capture. Consider the tracks. Soviet and IBT proving grounds testing documented that Sherman rubber bush tracks lasted approximately 3,120 kilometers before requiring replacement. T-34 tracks, forged from Hadfield steel, wore out around 1,000 kilometers. The American tank offered roughly a 3-to-1 advantage in track life. Captain Loza's estimate was more conservative but equally striking. He recalled that T-34 track life reached perhaps 2,500 kilometers, while Sherman tracks exceeded 5,000. For crews conducting deep exploitation, operations, racing, hundreds of kilometers behind German lines, this difference meant everything. But durability told only part of the story. The rubber tracks transformed how tanks moved and how crews fought. Loza described the difference with the mechanic's precision. "The Sherman drove like a car on hard surfaces," he wrote, "and our T-34 made so much noise that only the devil knows how many kilometers away it could be heard." Stealth capabilities emerged that Soviet designers had never prioritized. Sherman crews could separate the clutches and coast silently toward enemy positions. T-34 crews announced their presence to every German gunner within earshot. The gyro stabilizer represented technology no other nation fielded. The Westinghouse system stabilized the main gun in elevation while moving, allowing gunners to keep their weapon roughly aligned onto target during cross-country travel. Soviet testing at Kubinka showed the stabilizer improved firing precision by 2 times at 15 km per hour and 5 to 6 times at 25 km per hour. While not designed for accurate fire on the move, it allowed gunners to engage targets within a split second after halting, an eternity's advantage in tank versus tank combat. Inside the turret, differences multiplied. White-painted interior walls allowed crews to see when buttoned up in darkness. The artificial leather seats proved so coveted that Soviet infantry would strip knocked-out Shermans within minutes. Loza marveled at the aesthetics with genuine wonder. These were not just words, he insisted. They were beautiful. For us, then, this was something. The seats were comfortable, covered with some kind of remarkable special artificial leather. It made excellent boots, he added. Simply beautiful. Perhaps most critically, the Sherman's ammunition storage kept crews alive when everything else failed. Loza's description of this advantage remains harrowing. When a Sherman burned, he recalled the main gun ammunition did not explode. His crew once lay beneath their burning tank while German mortars fell around them. The uniform on his back began heating from the flames above. They heard loud thumps from the turret as armor-piercing rounds cooked off from their cases. They waited for the high-explosive rounds to detonate and end everything. But nothing happened. American explosives chemistry saved their lives. On T-34s, burning ammunition meant catastrophic explosion. Loza witnessed a company commander killed by a large piece of armor sticking out of his head after his Soviet tank's ammunition detonated. The combat record of Soviet Sherman units demonstrates why crews valued reliability over raw specifications. On April 9, 1945, Captain Dmitry Loza received orders that should have been impossible. Lead a detachment of 18 M4A2 Shermans, 3 ISU-152 assault guns, and 80 paratroopers on a 100-kilometer breakthrough to the center of Vienna. The mission required racing through enemy-held territory, smashing through barricades and resistance nodes, and reaching the Austrian capital a full day before the main brigade. Loza's force accomplished all objectives. They captured the city centre, they seized the bank, and with it, 18 tons of gold. The action earned Loza the hero of the Soviet Union. But the battle extracted its price. German panthers lurked in the narrow streets, and urban combat brought unexpected hazards. Loza ordered an ISU forward to engage a counter-attacking panther. The assault gun's massive 152mm round struck with such force that it knocked the German tank backward, separating the turret from the hull and landing it meters away. But the shot also shattered the leaded glass windows above. Loza recalled the chaos with dark humour. We had so many injured from broken glass falling on our heads. Vienna had beautiful windows, and all of them fell on us. Earlier that spring, the Sherman's much criticised height saved Loza's life through pure accident. In December 1944, he was leading his battalion when his driver clipped a curb on a turn. The tall, narrow Sherman tipped onto its side. The crew tumbled inside, bruised but alive. Meanwhile, his other 4 tanks continued ahead and drove directly into a German ambush. All 4 were destroyed. The vehicle's greatest weakness had become for one moment its salvation. The most remarkable Sherman engagement occurred near Lysyanka during the Korsun-Cherkasy operation in January 1944. A company commanded by Lieutenant Shabanyan found themselves parked beside German Tiger tanks during a blizzard. Neither side knew the other was there. The crews slept through the night mere meters apart. At dawn, visibility improved slightly. Shabanyan's men saw what lay 70 meters ahead. 2 immense black-crossed tanks with guns patrolling this road, prepared to destroy Soviet forces attacking from the front. Using hand signals to coordinate, the Sherman crews fired simultaneously. 4 shots tore through the early morning silence. 2 Tigers went up in flames. The second salvo finished the engagement. 3 more Tigers burned. There were no answering shots. German crews never saw them coming. Every gun sight aperture had packed with snow overnight. The men who should have died in a hopeless mismatch instead achieved complete surprise. Chabanyan's company lost not a single tank. If you are finding this documentary compelling, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Now let us examine the culture that developed among these Soviet Sherman crews. The tankers who operated American machines developed their own distinct identity and language. They called their tanks Emchisti, a Russian contraction of the designation M4, pronounced Emchetia in Russian. Crews who operated them became Emchisti, distinguishing themselves from T-34 crews with quiet pride. One tradition embodied the strange intimacy of alliance warfare. American factory workers, knowing their tanks would serve anonymous Soviet crews, hid gifts inside the vehicles. They called themselves the Secret Firm. Whiskey bottles wrapped in plastic appeared between grease plugs inside gun tubes. Loza's memoir describes the careful procedure crews developed to extract these treasures. After removal of the grease plug at the muzzle brake, a thin staff was used to carefully dislodge the middle barrier. Then the gun tube was gingerly depressed at the muzzle. A shelter half or tarpaulin was held at the muzzle to receive the gift. When the American technical representative nicknamed Misha learned that crews had initially missed these presents, he informed the factories. "They have found a good place to hide their presents," Misha reported. The Emchisti preserved this secret until the last days of the war, a small conspiracy of gratitude, spanning 10,000 kilometers of ocean and alliance. Official Soviet evaluations largely confirmed what crews already knew. The main armoured directorate conducted extensive testing at Kubinka proving grounds, producing balanced assessments that both praised and criticised the American design. The positive findings filled pages. Evaluators noted that the rubberized track has a long lifespan. They praised the transmission, turning mechanisms and suspension as reliable and requiring minimal effort to maintain. They documented that internal dimensions allow the crew to work freely, especially the gunner. They commended observation devices as simple, protected from rifle fire, and providing satisfactory visibility. The commander's cupola impressed Soviet engineers so thoroughly that December 1944 reports recommended installing the commander's cupola of the modernized American M4A2 tank into domestic tanks, as it is the most suitable for modern, tactical technical requirements. This recommendation influenced Soviet post-war designs, including IS-7 prototypes. Soviet criticisms addressed real limitations. Evaluators noted high ground pressure, excessive height, insufficient observation devices, and difficulty installing and removing components. They documented a higher tendency to overturn in road accidents and collisions or because of rough terrain. Loza himself called the tipping problem the Sherman's greatest weakness. The tank frequently tipped over on its side, he wrote, like a Matryoshka doll. The rubber tracks that provided such advantages in moderate conditions failed catastrophically in extremes. During the August 1944 Jassy-Kishinev operation in Romania, temperatures exceeding 30 degrees Celsius caused disaster. Loza recalled that after driving approximately 100 kilometers along a highway in a single day, the rubber linings on their support rollers got so hot that the rubber separated and peeled off in long pieces. The entire core sat immobilized for 3 days while repairs were improvised. Winter brought the opposite problem. Even on a slightly icy surface, Loza noted, the tank slid around like a fat cow. Crews welded cleats onto every fifth track link as standard practice, a field modification that Soviet industry never formally addressed. Against German heavy armour, the Sherman's limitations were absolute. Loza was explicit about this reality. The Sherman could never defeat a Tiger with a frontal shot, he stated. We had to force the Tiger to expose its flank. Soviet tactics required 2 Shermans working together, one to break the track, another to hit the exposed side. Individual Shermans engaging Tigers frontally simply died. Here is where the historical record requires careful qualification. The preference for Shermans among Guards units, while documented, was not universal. Many Soviet tankers who served only in the T-34s expressed fierce loyalties to their domestic machines. The T-34's lower silhouette, 2.7 meters versus the Sherman's 3.14, provided genuine tactical advantages. Soviet industry could repair T-34s with local resources. Sherman spare parts required transatlantic shipping. Some accounts may reflect survivor bias. Crews who lived to write memoirs often served in units with better equipment, better training, and better luck. The Emchisti who praised their American tanks were elite Guard soldiers. Their experiences may not represent the broader Red Army. Loza's memoir itself remained unpublished in the Soviet Union until he hand-delivered the manuscript to the American embassy in Moscow in February 1994. 50 years of censorship prevented Soviet citizens from reading accounts that praised American equipment over domestic designs. What other testimonies were suppressed, sanitized, or simply never written? German perspectives on Soviet Sherman units remain fragmentary. Wehrmacht intelligence noted that Sherman-equipped formations appeared everywhere from Hungary to East Prussia, suggesting Soviet employment of these units for rapid exploitation operations across the theatre. Captured M4A2s were tested at Kummersdorf Proving Grounds, where German mechanics reportedly found them an automotive masterpiece the Germans could only dream of producing. Some captured Shermans were converted to armoured recovery vehicles with turrets removed, testament to their mechanical reliability even in enemy hands. The ultimate judgment on Soviet Shermans may never be fully rendered. Records were destroyed, memoirs were censored, and the men who knew the truth are nearly all gone. What survives suggests that the Emchisti understood something their political officers could not acknowledge. The best tank is not always the one your country builds. Captain Dmitry Loza survived the war. His column reached Vienna's centre on April 9, 1945. He captured the bank and its 18 tons of gold. He earned the Hero of the Soviet Union. He had 3 Shermans shot out from under him across 2 years of combat, and he lived to see the surrender of both Germany and Japan. His final battle came in Manchuria, where the 46th Guards Tank Brigade, his brigade, fought entirely on HVSS Shermans with the new wide tracks, thousands of kilometres from Vienna. His 3rd Sherman was destroyed on April 19, 1945, 10 days after his triumph in the Austrian capital. A Tiger's round penetrated completely through the hull. The driver died instantly. 2 crew members lost their legs. Loza himself was badly wounded. He survived because the American tank's ammunition did not explode, because the hull held together long enough for rescue, because the machine that factory workers in Detroit had built and hidden whiskey inside performed exactly as designed in the worst moment imaginable. After the war, Loza rose to colonel and taught at the Frunze Military Academy. He wrote his memoir in the 1980s, knowing it could never be published while the Soviet Union existed. He walked it to the American embassy himself in 1994, 3 years after the red flag came down. He wanted the world to know what the Emchisti knew. He wanted someone to remember the secret firm and the whiskey in the gun tubes and the artificial leather that made such beautiful boots. When someone says to me that this was a bad tank, Loza wrote near the end of his account, I respond, excuse me, one cannot say that this was a bad tank. Bad as compared to what? He died in 2001 at 79 years old. The Sherman he commanded into Vienna became the first Allied tank to enter the Austrian capital. The factory workers who hid presents in its gun tube never learned his name, but perhaps that is how it should be. Perhaps alliance is simply this: strangers building machines for strangers, to fight in, hiding small kindnesses where they might be found, trusting that somewhere on the other side of the world someone will know what it means. Sometimes the best tank is not the most powerful one. Sometimes it is simply the one that brings you home